What if, on your wedding day, you discovered that you had a child that you never knew existed? Leonardo had built an empire and was about to marry the perfect woman, but everything falls apart when an ex-girlfriend shows up at the ceremony, accompanied by a boy identical to him. The guests whisper. The bride's gaze hardens, and Leonardo feels the ground disappear beneath his feet. 6 years old. The boy's exact age. Now he has to face a truth that could change his life forever. What would you do if your past came back to collect what you didn't even know you owed? Leonardo's mansion was lit up like a palace about to receive a king. Huge chandeliers hung from the ceiling, spreading golden light throughout the main hall. Staff were running around, adjusting the last details of the party that would precede the wedding of the year. Each piece of decoration had been meticulously chosen, reflecting the grandeur of the event. Leonardo walked around the room with his usual air of absolute control. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit and held a glass of aged whiskey between his fingers. His gaze roamed over the important guests who were already beginning to arrive. Businessmen, influential figures, all there to witness his rise. One of his closest friends, Gustavo, approached with a smile. "What do you know?" he said, tapping Leonardo on the shoulder. "The ambitious kid made it." Leonardo smiled, bringing his glass to his lips. "I always knew I could do it." Gustavo laughed, shaking his head. "And to think that years ago you lived in a tiny apartment and couldn't even afford a decent dinner. Now you're here, about to marry one of the most desirable and well-connected women." Leonardo shrugged. "The world belongs to those who stand up for themselves." Gustavo raised his glass in a silent toast and took a sip. From the upper floor, Luna watched her fiancé. His blue silk dress emphasized his elegance, and the glass of red wine in his hand seemed like the perfect accessory. She walked slowly down the stairs, her heels echoing on the gleaming marble. As she approached, she smiled at Leonardo and rested her hand on his chest. "Everything is perfect," she said, her voice soft and firm. "As it should be," he replied. Luna leaned over and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, before moving away to check a detail of the decoration. Leonardo watched her for a moment. She was a sophisticated woman, used to luxury. Marriage was more than just a commitment between them. It was a fusion of power. He turned to the window, looking out at the illuminated night. Everything was going exactly as he had planned, but an unexpected thought crossed his mind, a ghost from the past that he had never really faced. Carol, the only woman who had ever meant anything real to him, the only one who left before he could prove himself. He reached into his pocket for his cell phone and dialed a number. The phone rang a few times before his aide answered. "Sir?" Leonardo turned the glass of whiskey in his hand, looking at the amber liquid. "I need you to find someone." "Of course, sir. Who's that?" "Carol." There was a brief hesitation on the other end of the line. "Carol, your ex-girlfriend?" "Yes. I want her to come to the wedding." The silence lasted for a moment. "Any specific message?" Leonardo smiled to himself. "Tell her I want her to be there." The call ended, and he leaned back on the black leather sofa, still holding his glass. A hard-to-name feeling crossed his mind. It wasn't longing. It wasn't regret. It was a desire for Carol to see for herself everything he had achieved without her. He wanted her to understand. He wanted her to know that he didn't need her. He raised his glass in a silent toast to his own victory and drank the rest of the whiskey. After all, he had won. The day of the event finally arrived. The sun was setting over the horizon, tinting the sky with orange and gold hues as the first guests began to arrive at Leonardo's mansion. The setting was impeccable, full of important figures. The flashes of the photographers' cameras lit up the main entrance, where luxury cars stopped to drop off the guests. Leonardo, dressed in an elegant tuxedo, greeted those present with a satisfied smile. His posture exuded confidence, as if he were at the peak of his powers. At his side, Luna, always impeccable, shone in a long, sophisticated dress. "Everything is just as I imagined," she commented, entwining her fingers with Leonardo's. He smiled, giving her a small kiss. He smiled, giving her hand a small kiss. It couldn't be any different. But deep down, something was bothering him. A nagging thought that hadn't left him alone since the day he had made that unexpected invitation. And then it happened. When he looked at the main entrance, his body went rigid for a moment. The world seemed to slow down. Carol had arrived. She walked slowly into the hall, as elegant as he remembered. Her dress was simple but impeccable, and her presence seemed to cause an immediate buzz among the guests. However, that wasn't what made Leonardo's heart hammer in his chest. It was the boy walking beside her, holding her hand. The whispers began. "Do you see what I see?" whispered one guest to another. He looks like—" Leonardo felt a lump form in his throat. The boy had the dark hair, the intense gaze, the bearing. He could have been seeing himself years ago. Luna noticed his rigid expression and followed his gaze. When her eyes met Carol's and the boy's, her body stiffened. "Who is that woman?" Luna asked, narrowing her eyes. Leonardo took a second to answer, feeling the weight of the moment. "An old acquaintance." Carol approached, her expression serene but full of something unspoken. "Congratulations on the wedding, Leonardo," she said with a small smile. "It looks like you got everything you wanted." It took Leonardo a second to recover his voice. "Carol? I didn't know if you were coming." She raised her eyebrows slightly. How could she refuse such a personal invitation? Silence hung between them. Luna stood next to her fiancé, her eyes analyzing every detail of Carol's with coldness. Then she looked at the boy. "And who is that?" asked Luna, her voice sweet but laden with latent suspicion. Carol bent down gently and stroked the boy's hair. "My son." The tension in the room increased. Leonardo felt his heart racing. The air around him seemed heavier, as if the world was suddenly pushing all reality onto him. "How old is he?" Leonardo's voice came out lower than he had intended. Carol kept her smile soft, but her eyes carried something deeper. 6 years old. 6. Leonardo did the math in his mind, his brain working faster than ever. 6 years. The time exactly matched the end of their relationship. Luna squeezed Leonardo's arm, feeling the growing stiffness in him. "Can we talk in private?" Leonardo murmured to Carol. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Of course." The two of them moved away a little, while Luna remained in place, watching everything with attentive eyes. When they were at a safe distance, Leonardo wasted no time. "Is he my son?" Carol crossed her arms, keeping a firm expression. "Do you think I'd be here if he wasn't?" Leonardo closed his eyes for a brief second, before opening them again and looking at her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She took a deep breath. "Because you never asked." The answer was like a punch in the stomach. Leonardo ran a hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. Everything he had built up, everything he had become. And now a truth that could change everything came out of nowhere. Carol watched his reaction calmly. "I don't want anything from you, Leonardo. I just thought you should know." He opened his mouth to reply, but Luna appeared beside him, interrupting. "Darling, what's going on?" Leonardo hesitated. Nothing. Just talking." But Luna had understood enough. Her gaze went from Carol to the boy and finally landed on Leonardo. "We need to get back to the party," she said, taking her fiancé's arm. Carol only smiled slightly. "Of course, I don't want to get in the way." She walked away with the boy, but the impact had already been made. Leonardo stood still for a moment, the weight of the discovery pressing down on his mind. He tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize, but something inside him told him that this night was far from over. Leonardo felt the weight of 1,000 stares on him. Even surrounded by so many guests, he felt alone, trapped inside his own mind. Carol's words echoed in his head, bringing up a whirlwind of feelings that he wasn't prepared to face. 6 years old. The boy was 6. He glanced discreetly over to where Carol was standing. She was talking to some people, maintaining the same confident posture as always. The boy stood next to her, playing with a napkin, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed. Leonardo tightened his fingers around the glass of whiskey. It couldn't be a coincidence. Luna, next to him, noticed his distraction and held his arm gently, but her voice came out firm. "What exactly did that woman want with you?" Leonardo blinked a few times, forcing himself to concentrate. "Nothing. We just, talked." Luna tilted her head slightly, her eyes scanning her fiancé's expression. "And the boy?" He hesitated. "Her son." Luna's gaze narrowed, and she forced a polite smile as a couple of businessmen approached to greet them. For a few minutes, Leonardo played his part, distributing smiles and answering comments about the grandeur of the event. But his mind was elsewhere. As soon as he had the chance, he turned away from the crowd and headed for the garden, where the air was cooler. She needed a moment away from the chaos of the party. That's when he heard a childish giggle. He stopped, his heart beating irregularly. Turning his head slowly, he saw Carol and the boy up ahead. The boy was laughing, playing with a small branch, pretending it was a sword. Leonardo swallowed. That laugh, it was his, from when he was a child. Every movement the boy made, every expression seemed to bring on a déjà vu that Leonardo couldn't explain. Taking a deep breath, he approached. Carol noticed him first and didn't seem surprised. "Running away from the party?" she asked without looking away from her son. Leonardo tried to keep his voice steady. "I need to know." Carol raised an eyebrow. "Know what?" He looked at the boy, then at her. "You know what?" She let out a sigh and crossed her arms. "What if I do? What are you going to do with this information?" Leonardo had no answer, not yet, but he knew he needed the truth. "I want a DNA test." Carol gave a low, humorless laugh. "Of course you do." He didn't like her tone. "Is this a game for you? For me?" Carol gave him a sharp look. "You invite me to your wedding out of pure provocation, and now you want to tell me that I'm the one playing the game?" Leonardo frowned. "I had a right to know." She held her chin for a moment, as if she was holding something back. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but charged with something deep. "You left, Leonardo. You moved on. When I found out I was pregnant, I realized I couldn't expect anything from you, so I moved on too." Leonardo opened his mouth but found no words. The boy, oblivious to the intense conversation between the two adults, looked at him and smiled. "Are you a friend of my mother's?" Leonardo felt the ground disappear for a moment. "Yes," he answered automatically. Carol watched her fiancé carefully, waiting for his reaction. The boy innocently held out his hand. "My name is Luca." Leonardo looked at the small hand held out in front of him. A strange tightness appeared in his chest. He held the boy's hand, feeling the warmth of that small palm against his own. "Leonardo." He introduced himself, almost in a whisper. Carol looked away for a brief moment, and a heavy silence settled between them. "Do the DNA test if you want," Carol said at last. "But you already know the truth." Leonardo slowly let go of the boy's hand, feeling the impact of that sentence. "I need certainty," Carol sighed. "Then find out." She took Luca's hand and began to walk away, leaving Leonardo alone, staring at the empty space in front of him. He felt that somehow his life would never be the same again. The clock struck almost midnight, but the party continued. The sound of music filled the room. Guests danced and toasted, and camera flashes blinked like artificial stars. To any outside observer, it was a perfect evening. But for Leonardo, perfection had become an irrelevant detail. He was standing in one corner of the room, holding a glass of whiskey that he had barely touched. His gaze went from Carol to Luca, then back to Luna, who was chatting with a group of socialites. Reality hit him cruelly. If Luca was his son, and everything indicated that he was, what would that mean? How would it change his life? Leonardo felt a hand squeeze his arm and turned around. Luna was standing there, smiling in a controlled manner. "What's wrong?" he asked, tense. "I should ask you that," said Luna, narrowing her eyes. "Ever since that woman showed up, you haven't been the same. It's all in your head." Luna tilted her head, appraising him. "Is it? So tell me, Leonardo, why are you obsessed with her?" He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not obsessed, I just didn't expect to see her again. Or her son." Leonardo didn't answer straight away. "He's 6, Luna." The phrase carried more weight than he would have liked to admit. Luna wasn't naive. Her eyes narrowed even more. "You think he's yours?" It wasn't a question. Leonardo looked around, making sure no one was listening. "I don't know. Did you ask for a test?" "I did." Luna pressed her lips together. "What if it is?" Leonardo felt a pressure in his chest. He had never thought about being a father. He had never even considered the possibility. "I don't know." Luna looked at Carol, who was laughing at something someone had said. Her posture was that of someone who didn't seem shaken by anything. "She did it on purpose," said Luna bitterly. "Did what?" "She showed up here with the child. It's a move, Leonardo." He looked at Luna. "Do you think she wants something from me?" Luna crossed her arms. "It's obvious." Leonardo looked at Carol and Luca again. Something inside him told him it wasn't that simple. "There's only one way to find out," he muttered. Hours later, the event had dissipated. The guests were leaving, and Leonardo finally found Carol alone, grabbing a coat. He approached her. "Carol." She turned to him, arching an eyebrow. "Yes?" He hesitated. "I want to sort this out soon. Can we do the test tomorrow?" Carol let out a low laugh. "Do you really need the test?" "Yes, I do." She nodded, seeming to assess something inside him. All right, but Leonardo." She took a step forward, her expression more serious. "What are you going to do if he's your son?" He didn't answer. Carol smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Think about it." She walked away, leaving Leonardo alone, facing his own doubts. Leonardo stared at the unopened envelope on the glass table in front of him. The result was there. A single sheet of paper capable of changing his life forever. His hands were clenched into fists on his knees, his breathing heavy. The night before had been a whirlwind. After Carol had agreed to take the test, Leonardo hadn't been able to sleep. He had spent hours mentally going over all the possibilities, and now the moment had arrived. Luna stood beside him, arms crossed, impatient. "What are you waiting for? Just open it." He didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the envelope, as if hypnotized by what it represented. "You already know the answer, don't you?" insisted Luna, her voice laden with tension. He did. From the moment he saw Luca for the first time, something inside him screamed the truth, but admitting it was another story. With a deep sigh, Leonardo took the envelope and tore open the side, pulling the paper out. His eyes scanned the words, looking for the only piece of information that mattered, and then he saw it. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Time seemed to stop. Luna leaned over his shoulder to see the result. "So that's it," she said, her tone low but sharp as a blade. Leonardo couldn't answer. He felt the weight of the words settling on him like a collapsing wall. "And now," Luna asked, crossing her arms, He massaged his temples, trying to contain the chaos inside him. I need to think. Luna let out a dry laugh. Think, Leonardo? That changes everything. He looked up at her, his expression serious. I know. Luna watched him for a moment before turning away. I'll wait for you to make up your mind. But if you think I'm going to accept this circus in our lives, you're wrong. She left the office, leaving Leonardo alone with the paper that said, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was a father. He didn't know how long he stood there, just staring at the document. Then he made a decision. He had to see Luca. When he arrived at the small apartment where Carol lived, she was already waiting for him at the door, as if she knew he was coming. You read the result. Leonardo nodded, unable to look away from her. Carol opened the door and beckoned him in. The apartment was simple but cozy, nothing luxurious, but full of life. Luca was on the living room floor drawing something with colored pencils. When he saw Leonardo, he cracked a smile. Hi! Leonardo felt a tightness in his chest. Hi, Luca. Carol watched them interact in silence. Luca picked up one of the drawings and held it up. Look, it's a rocket! Leonardo took the paper, analyzing the childish trait. It's amazing. Do you like space? The boy nodded enthusiastically. I want to be an astronaut. Leonardo bent down so that he was at his height. I bet you'll make it. Luca smiled and went back to his drawing. Carol crossed her arms. He's a good boy. Leonardo took a deep breath before facing her. I want to be in his life. Carol tilted her head slightly. Are you sure about that? He looked at Luca again. I've never been so sure of anything. Carol's apartment looked different now. In fact, it was Leonardo who had changed. Before, everything there seemed too small for his reality, far from the world of luxury he had built. Now, every detail of that simple house seemed to have more meaning than anything money could buy. Luca continued to draw, immersed in his own universe, while Carol and Leonardo remained silent. He needed to choose the right words. I want to be part of his life, he repeated, his voice firm but charged with emotion. Carol crossed her arms, studying his face. You can't decide that just because you've discovered the truth now, Leonardo. Being a father is not a momentary impulse. I know, he said without hesitation. And I know I was wrong not to have been here before. But now I am. She sighed, looking away for a moment. Luca doesn't know who you are. To him, you're just a stranger he saw once at a party. Leonardo felt a tightness in his chest. I can change that. Carol stared at him for a moment before speaking again, in a softer tone. If you really want this, you need to take it slow. He can't just wake up tomorrow and discover that he has a father. Leonardo nodded. What do I have to do? Carol hesitated before answering. We can start slowly. You can see him from time to time, spend time with him, but without pressure. Leonardo felt a strange relief. It was a start. Thank you. Carol smiled slightly. Don't make promises you can't keep. Luca raised his head, looking at them both. Are you going to date? Carol and Leonardo looked at each other, surprised. No, Luca, Carol replied, laughing. We're just talking. The boy seemed satisfied with the answer and went back to his drawing. Over the next few days, Leonardo found himself discovering a new world. For the first time in years, his routine didn't just revolve around meetings, investments, and status. He began to visit Luca frequently, respecting his space, but making an effort to be present. On one of these visits, he took him to a park. Luca was running around on the grass, laughing out loud, and Leonardo was watching him with a genuine smile. He likes you, said Carol, standing next to him. I like him too. She looked at him for a moment. Then, don't go away. Leonardo turned to her. I'm not going. She smiled, and for the first time in years, the weight of the past seemed to dissipate. The future was still uncertain, but Leonardo knew one thing for sure. He was no longer alone.